All right. Now, what are the obstacles to everybody doing that or more people doing that from the individual psychology point of view and from the government policy point of view?
The obstacles for the individual who wants to do that are as follows. The things like solar electric and buying a large windmill, one of those huge investment windmills like I bought, economics. A lot of people who have lower incomes, some middle income people can't afford a huge system like I did, a solar system, or to buy a large portion in a wind farm as I did. People don't have the resources to do that, but they can, as I said, pick the low-hanging fruit, and then as they save money, they can go on and do maybe a small solar installation, 1,000 watts, 1 kilowatt or something on the roof, not nearly 7 kilowatts the way I have, and just do a little bit of mitigation of their power use. That is to say, they'll spin the meter backwards at night, spin it forward during the day, and get a bill for the net metering, which is quite prevalent nowadays. They can do those things. People with middle income can do those things today. And all the other things I mentioned that are quite economically viable for people in the lower income brackets as well as middle income people.
How much of a threat to middle class lifestyles do you think that the coming or the already having passed of peak oil is?
Huge. We're seeing it now. We've seen reports on the news of people going to pawn shops to pawn valuable items, heirlooms, guitars, family precious items to fill up gas because they need to get to, from Simi Valley to Garden Grove to do their job. And they live in Simi Valley and they work in Garden Grove. Part of it is a bizarre sense of urban planning that we've been guilty of for many years, and suburban planning. And part of it is the cost. Who could have ever predicted that oil would go up so quickly? People are saying, well, we all did. Not all of us, but many of us did. We saw this coming, and there's no pleasure in that. We just have to go forward from this point now and have a future that is economically viable. That is to say, real capitalism. David Brower said, capitalism is a great idea. We should try it.
It's like what Gandhi said about Western civilization.
Right.
Someone asked him, what do you think of Western civilization? He said, I think it would be a good idea.
Yes, it would be a good idea, Western civilization. So would capitalism in its purest form. That is to say, to really value all of your resources as your capital and not have a fire sale liquidating your resources, cutting down all your trees, and liquidating all your resources like your business.
So in fact, what you're saying is basing a huge metropolitan area on cheap gas is a little bit like a hunter-gatherer or a very low-tech society, cutting down all the trees for firewood and then getting floods and nothing to cook food
Exactly,
with.
the way the people on Easter Island did and many other civilizations.
It has to do with carrying capacity.
Exactly, there's a carrying capacity.
Now, do you think that here we're in the middle of, I guess, one of the largest metropolitan aggregations in the world, 10 million people just in Los Angeles County, dependent for food, transportation, recreation, status, self-image on burning cheap petroleum, which is running out. Do you see a gradual transformation to a more viable system or a cataclysmic collapse?
Well, it's happened already. You need only look at what happened in Cuba when things got turned upside down there years ago.
The Soviet subsidy.
Exactly. When they stopped subsidizing things in Cuba, as they had for many years, we've seen the peak oil paradigm played out in Cuba. I'm not ready to move to Cuba, don't get me wrong, but there are some lessons to be learned there. They suddenly all became urban farmers, urban gardeners right away. They started growing things on vacant lots. They started finding new ways to get around. There were, changes in the public transportation system. I'm not suggesting it's an ideal society there by any means, but there are lessons to learn, and it's what's going to happen here. People make do, they get by, they find other ways, and we're going to have to do that here. We're going to have to find other ways to power things, to move ourselves from point A to point B, and to grow our crops, and to do many other things.
Okay, let me talk about some specific issues. Prop 87 is going to be on the ballot this November, which will impose a $4 billion in severance taxes on oil producers and purports to spend the money on clean alternative energy. What's your take on Prop 87?
I'm for it. I think it's a good idea. I hope it passes. I think any way we can begin to level the playing field. That is to say, some folks decry the notion of giving more subsidies to solar and wind, and why can't they just make it on their own well, let's eliminate all of them. Let's eliminate some of the subsidies for coal and oil depletion allowances and all the many subsidies that the oil industries allow.
Has anyone taken into account the investment in the roads that's taken for granted for billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that's been spent on roads, whereas putting, for example, fiber optic around so that people can telecommute raises the same kind of eyebrows that your electric car did 35 years ago?
Yeah, I think we should focus more on that, more telecommuting. Not everyone can do that, of course, but many people can. There is a great investment in the infrastructure of roads. It's another way things are subsidized. Nuclear power is subsidized with the Price-Anderson Act, with all of us ensuring these huge nuclear power plants that it's the most expensive way to boil water we've ever come up with when you look at all the costs.
Are you one of the people who supports what's called green nuclear as a way of cutting down on greenhouse gases, or do you think that the waste disposal problem or other issues override that?
I'm a big supporter of nuclear power. We have the most safe nuclear power plant. It's perfectly sited. It's sited 93 million miles away from us right now, putting out wonderful, cheap, abundant nuclear power that we receive in the form of photons here on our planet. I'm very much in favor of nuclear power, and there's one great power plant I like to rely on for the vast majority of our power.
And in fact, that's a fusion plant, which
exactly.
doesn't produce
beautiful
any
fusion plant,
which they're still trying to. They're spending tens of billions of dollars to bring to Earth when it's already there. Okay.
Yeah.